It's so good to be here today with you, church. And as Paul said, I'm Caitlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of a church that is talking about justice. And it's an honor to participate in this series because for years I've been experimenting with what it means to pursue justice through loving my neighbors here in this city that I love, in Saskatoon. So probably a lot of us are aware that the West Side is where poverty is disproportionately represented in our city. It's a diverse neighborhood, home to many Indigenous people and many newcomers to Canada. In our city, it is a community that is often feared, or it is pitied, or we just ignore it. But as I've drawn close to this neighborhood, I continually learn that there is more to the story than the suffering. So let me tell you the real story of Pleasant Hill. Yes, it's an exciting place to live. There are people struggling with addictions, and there are also cookums with quick laughs and sassy wisdom who care for their grandchildren. Yes, there are language barriers, and there is racism. And there are also children who play soccer together even when they can't communicate with words. Yes, there's homelessness, there is poverty, and there are people who smile at you and wish you a good day when you pass them on the street. There are people who are so proud of their first job. There are people who are courageously learning how to drive, who are practicing English even when it's awkward. And like most things in our world, while we live in this reality of God's kingdom has come, but is not yet here fully, there is pain in our community and there is beauty. And because I'm part of it, it is good news for me to experience this beauty also. And we're pointed to this in the ancient stories of Scripture. God speaks through his prophet Jeremiah to his people who are living in exile. That means they're forcibly living in a place where they did not want to live, and they're living among people they would rather not interact with. And this is what God tells them. He says, build homes and plan to stay. Plant gardens and eat the food they produce. Marry and have children, then find spouses for them so that you may have many grandchildren. Multiply, do not dwindle away, and work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I have sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. And the word in this passage that is peace, prosperity, welfare, that word is actually translated from the Hebrew word shalom we've been talking about. So we're instructed here to seek the shalom of the city, for in its shalom, you will have shalom. And so God's imagination for us, for his people, even when we're in unfamiliar places, among unfamiliar people, is a vision of a flourishing community where needs are being met, where people are proud to live and happy to stay. So shalom means living interconnected with our community. Shalom means when my neighbors suffer, I suffer. When my neighbors rejoice, I rejoice. The good news for me and God's heart for justice is that there is room for all of us to participate in this family of God. So when I think about God's call to justice, when I think about my welfare being interconnected with my neighbors, a quote from Lila Watson, who's an Indigenous activist in Australia, often comes to mind, and I'll leave her words with you. She says, if you've come to my people to help, then you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. I certainly appreciate the idea of how when we live together, when we know each other, we have the same experiences. When it's hard, we experience the hardness. When it's joyful, we experience the joyful parts together. And that's thank you for the challenging and amazing journey and story that you've been part of living and living out your calling. Now, Kathleen, could you tell us a bit about about yourself and your call to certain partners and your experience?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Caitlin. So today, hopefully, I'll be able to give some practical stuff for all of you guys to take home and continue to wrestle with. I recently read a verse from the book of Esther. It's one of my favorite books in the Bible, and I just think it's so relevant. This scripture has been transformative for me as I wonder what living justly could look like in the next season of my life, and I think it really adds a lot to our conversation. So let's dive in. Esther is a young Jewish woman living in the ancient Persian Empire. She's recently become queen. The scripture we are looking at comes at the moment when Esther is afraid of the risk that she could face if she speaks up to the king about the looming genocide of her people. Her cousin Mordecai has this response to her fear. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. Esther is on the precipice. She's about to step into the unknown and unleash justice for her people. There's so much wisdom in Mordecai's response to Esther's fear, and I'd like to pull out 4 themes from this moment. The first one is to remember shalom. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. This is exactly what Caitlin and some of the other speakers this month have been talking about. Esther's cousin reminds her that shalom for everyone is the goal, not just self-preservation. Esther's welfare is tied to the welfare of her people. We cannot see ourselves thriving apart from a community that is thriving. None of us can experience shalom if there are people left on the outside. By offering and receiving love to one another, we can experience the richness of abundant life and community that is more whole. Second one is to zoom in. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this? I want everyone to consider their current situation. Where do you hold power and influence already? Sometimes we're tempted to see the power that we hold as a bad thing, but what if we started seeing the positions we occupy as opportunities to act justly? What would it look like to wield your power for the deliverance and thriving of others? Let's zoom in on our lives right now. Think about the people who work in your building, maybe the neighbors that you live alongside. Think about the transit systems that you use, the parks you walk through with your dog every day. Think about your household situation, the roles that are shared or divided by the people you live with. Do you see signs of injustice in these places? Ask God to open your eyes to see your life through his eyes. Maybe God wanted you to be here to notice this. What if where you are, what you have, and who you know is not an accident, but God's work of restoring shalom through you? The third one is to be humble. This one's hard. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place. Maybe for some of us, the invitation to join God in his work of justice feels exciting and important. But maybe for others, this feels like a huge burden or like something that you'll never be able to do. Either way, the work of justice is bigger than any one of us. If you decide to say no to this invitation, God will raise up someone else. I wonder if others could have stopped the genocide of the Jews in that time, but said no. Maybe Esther was the 3rd or 4th option, but the first to say yes. Let's say you do say yes. You do your absolute best. You stick your neck out for someone, you pour yourself out, and things don't go as you hoped. The story isn't over either. God sees the bigger picture and is continuously inviting limited, imperfect, often cynical people to join him in the restoration and renewal of all things. Our yes matters a lot, but the work is much bigger than what any one of us can do. The fourth thing is to embrace risk. Esther lives in a time and place where speaking up to defend the Jews is more than awkward, it's dangerous. Even as the queen, she's taking a huge risk. Seeking the welfare of people on the margins involves risk. There's no simple, easy way to solve injustice. Yes, this one is meant to be an uncomfortable challenge. Risk is scary. I'm not saying that we all need to dive into the nearest dangerous situation. Please don't. But we need to know that acting justly costs us something. Risk is unavoidable for many people on the margins, so we can look to people who experience injustice for strength and courage in the way that they fight against it.